So, what is emotional eating? It's really how I define it to my clients is when it's your only or your largest outlet for strong emotions. So, that can look like a lot of things. I think this might be talked about in another question, but that can look like anything from stress and boredom eating to letting your emotions kind of dictate how you navigate food, whether that's forcing yourself to eat more or forcing yourself to eat less. It can kind of go in both directions. So, for my own tendencies when I emotionally eat, I think my biggest trigger is definitely stress. I think that the triggers that you have for emotional eating tend to come from childhood. And when I was younger, my comfort food was always things like spaghetti with butter and Parmesan cheese and lots of pepper. So, really, anytime I'm stressed, I immediately crave that. So, it can be that. A lot of times it's hunger. I know that's a big one for people, and it might not strike people as something that has to do with emotional eating. But when you kind of drill down into it, that anger, which is an emotion, is coming from your body not having food, whether you waited too long to eat, you forgot about lunch, or you were trying to refrain from eating. This might be an unpopular opinion, but think something like intuitive eating, where you're waiting until noon, and by noon you're ravenous and maybe a little bit monstrous too. So I definitely see that in myself. Not that I in practice intuitive eating, but if I'm working too long, I definitely feel the hanger sometimes. I would say there's several. I think the most popular, maybe not a good word, but the most common ones are probably things like stress and anxiety and boredom, like I said. One of the most common things I definitely see is comfort eating, like I said, which I definitely see in myself as well. But I would say that other things that come into play can be a kind of a feeling for a need of control as well, which I think is a big one that's missed very often when we talk about emotional eating and kind of the common signs or triggers of it. So that's kind of where it comes into where I talked previously about where people either minimize or kind of maximize their food intake. So I guess first I'll give some background on what an eating story is for those who don't know what it is, but it's basically how I describe it to my clients is what got you to this point with your relationship with food and even things like exercise. I certainly like to include that because they often kind of tie hand in hand. And that can be anything from how you were raised to how you talked about food growing up and um, just kind of how you were exposed to it along the way. So with my eating story, I think the largest part of it started, um, I guess, when I was a lot younger. Food was something that was definitely very celebrated and highly valued in my family. My Oma always cooked big German dinners for us, really traditional kind of cultural foods to us. We always used food as a way to celebrate. So I never saw it in a negative way growing up, but I would say that that kind of changed when I was in college. I would say at that point, for a lot of people, the way that food and your body is talked about really changes. So I think that was the first time in my life that I gained more than a few pounds at one time. And I think I just kind of mentally panicked. So I started essentially trying to be perfect and kind of being really careful of what I ate and doing the right kind of workouts, whether that was probably more cardio than my body could handle at the time or lifting weights, things like that. So I fell into somewhat of an unhealthy pattern with food and exercise. And it actually probably wasn't until a road trip with my boyfriend where I realized that what I was doing was causing more harm than good to my body than I really originally thought. So on this road trip we were on, I kind of opened up to him about what I was struggling with. And we just decided to just do whatever we wanted. And I wasn't going to think about what I was eating for a week. And it was probably one of the most beneficial times in terms of food for me because it completely changed how I looked at it. And like I said, made me realize that what I was doing really wasn't healthy. So between that and my studying at IIN, kind of teaching me to find more balance and focusing on what's the word I'm looking for? Abundance over scarcity really changed my opinion on how I look at things and led me to be a health coach. So that's essentially my eating story in a nutshell. So I describe the diet cycle as being essentially this journey of people disliking their body for some reason, starting a very restrictive diet, essentially eventually feeling some kind of shame around either falling off of that or it being too restrictive that you just can't take it anymore. Usually that will lead to some kind of binge or falling off the wagon, like a lot of people will call it, and then an immediate need to jump back on the bandwagon and restart the diet again. A lot of us are looking for more of a quick fix than a long term resolution. And I think a lot of that comes down to diet culture pushing us to be perfect all the time. So when we fall out of that, we get that sense of shame, like I said. So, really, that revolution of just dieting, feeling bad, and then starting it all over again due to that kind of aggressive restriction is how I usually frame it. So, in terms of channeling those feelings of strong emotions and how you navigate food, I think one of the most powerful ways you can navigate that is by using that emotional eating or feeling of wanting to emotionally eat as a sign from your body rather than just a trigger to eat. So, part of that is where I help clients take kind of a step back and ask, why am I feeling this way? Whether it's stress, boredom, general overwhelm, and channeling that into something that will be more nourishing for them. Of course, if you're hungry, you should certainly grab a snack. But if it's purely out of boredom or stress, asking yourself, what would suit me better in this moment is really powerful, whether that's going to read a book or doing some yoga or going for a run. You'll find that those things tend to ease that emotion better without fully, just suppressing it in food. So, yeah, kind of redirecting that into a routine of self care is how I like to rechannel. So, I guess in terms of how you view your relationship with food, I wouldn't have one specific thing to tell you. I think that we're all bio individual and our lens of how we look at food is all going to vary no matter what. For example, I think the biggest kind of difference I like to note in people is there's a lot of people who are live to eat, and then there's a lot of people who are eat to live. I'm very much on the live to eat part of things because I just love a good meal. So people will naturally look at food differently. But in terms of making your relationship with food a little bit better, um, I think some of the biggest things are some of the things we've talked about, like approaching food with a scarcity mindset rather than abundance. What can I have? What does make me feel good rather than focusing just on the foods that you may not be able to have from your diet and those things that don't make you feel good. I also think when we stop focusing on cutting out foods, we do realize truthfully what makes us feel good and what doesn't. So, for example, there's a lot of people who jump right on the gluten free, dairy free trend without really knowing if that's what their body needs. So, when we build that awareness of what actually works and what doesn't, we're able to see if those are actually things we need to cut out or maybe just be slightly more aware of if they make us feel off for a little bit. Um, I think another one would be similar to this scarcity and restriction is focusing on adding in versus adding versus removing. I think the other thing really is also that eating story that we talked about previously and digging into your past and kind of figuring out why these things have gotten you to this moment. What's even more powerful is taking that eating story and then rewriting it so that you can kind of reframe how those things happened and where you can go from here. So that's something that I like to do with my clients a lot as well. And then honestly, learning new kind of cooking techniques is a great thing as well because you get more excited about food and you lose that feeling of negativity towards it that you might feel when you are experiencing emotional eating as that main source of comfort. You should seek help from a friend or family member or a professional. I would say, similar to what I kind of defined emotional eating as in the beginning, is that if emotional eating becomes your only outlet for strong emotions, that can look a lot of different ways again. But if you feel like you can't handle those without food, it's become your only crutch. Some other signs I've heard from a lot of popular dietitians are things like if you're experiencing binge eating, but hiding your snack intake from other people out of embarrassment or shame. Those are some good signs that you should probably seek help from a professional. a health coach will really help you with your habits around it and your awareness, whereas a therapist or someone like that will be able to dig more into your background and get down to the emotional root of things. So a health coach, a dietitian to help you kind of improve your diet while also improving that relationship with your food. That team of people can be massively helpful if it's something that you're really struggling with, or maybe you're even struggling with disordered eating. My name is Alex Greenbaum. I'm an emotional eating coach at Alexandria's Wellness, and you can find me on Instagram at Alexandria's Wellness, same on Facebook as well.